Hello. Hi, this is Councilor Flynn.
Hi, Counselor.
Oh, hey, Ryan. Hey, Commissioner, it's good to be with you. Thank you for joining us. Is Juan or Kerry there from City Council Central Staff?
Hey, Mr. Chair, Kerry here. I am rolling and ready to start whenever you are.
Okay, Kerry. Thank you, Kerry.
No problem.
Kerry, can you share the screen so I can see everybody?
Absolutely.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is City Councilor Ed Flynn, and I'm the chair of the City Council Committee on City and Neighborhood Services. In accordance with Governor Baker's March 2020 executive order, modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law and relieving public bodies of certain requirements, including the requirement that the public conduct its meeting in a public place that is open and accessible to the public. The City Council will be conducting this hearing virtually. This enables the City Council to carry out its responsibilities while adhering to public health recommendations and ensuring public access to its deliberations through adequate alternative means. This public hearing is being recorded and live streamed on www.boston.gov/citycouncil-tv. It would also be rebroadcast at a later date on Xfinity 8, RCN 82, and FiOS 964. Anyone that would like to testify on this matter, please email juan.lopez@boston.gov for the Zoom link. Today's hearing is on docket 0418, order for a hearing to discuss off-leash dog recreation spaces in the city of Boston. This matter is sponsored by City Councilor Ricardo Arroyo and was referred to the Committee on City and Neighborhood Services on March 21st, 2021. I am joined by my colleague, City Councilor Ricardo Arroyo, City Councilor Kenzie Bach, City Councilor Matt O'Malley, and at this time, City Councilor O'Malley had his hand up. I just wanted to ask Councilor O'Malley if he had any question before I continued.
No, sorry, Mr. Chair. That was just to be let in from the waiting room. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor O'Malley. So at this time, I will first let my colleagues offer opening statements and then hand it over to the panelists from the city that are here with us. After that, I'll offer testimony from my colleagues as well. We are also joined by Ryan Woods, who's the Commissioner of Parks and Recreation for the City of Boston, and Alexis Trzynski. I apologize. I know I didn't pronounce your name correctly. Director of Animal Care and Control. Community advocates that are also planning to testify are Kara Holmquist, who's the Director of Advocacy for the Mass Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, and Claudia Dunn, who's the Vice President of the Dog Park Association of Southwest Boston. And I know, Alexis, I apologize for that, and I'll make sure I have it corrected. your last name. At this time, let me offer the sponsor, Councilor Arroyo, to offer opening statement. Councilor Arroyo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just before I begin, I do believe that the advocates are in the attendee waiting room, if we can let them in. So thank you, Mr. Chair, our panelists, and thank you to the many advocates who have lifted the need for more equitable dog park distribution throughout the city. This has probably been one of the hearings that I've done that has received the most interaction and the most response. And I think that speaks directly to several things, which I'll just briefly go into, which is the first is the dire need for this. Access to dog parks in the city of Boston, of which there are 7 that are run by the city. One's in the public gardens in the Boston Common, one is in the South End, one is in the North End, 3 are in Dorchester, and 1 is in South Boston, which is managed by a private abutter. But what those neighborhoods are essentially are high income neighborhoods. And the reason for that lack of access is due to the fact that the city of Boston historically has left neighborhoods to advocate on their own to bring dog parks in, which has required private resources, has required private partnerships to get these things done. And so from that standpoint, it's really important that the city see dog parks not as something that is sort of, for lack of a better word, a hobby or a thing to do, but rather a place to allow our residents and our constituents, including their animals, to have a safe and equitable place, a safe and open place to play. And one of the things that I've advocated for strongly as a city councilor for District 5, which is Rosendale, Mattapan, and Hyde Park, is that we don't have any on this part of town. We have none in West Roxbury. There's none. I don't believe there's one in JP. There's none in Hyde Park. There's none in Rosendale. There's none in Mattapan. And this disparity is a real issue for dog owners. And the other reason I think that this has really received a bunch of attention is that if you've ever owned a dog, and I've owned dogs most of my life, I have 2 now, they are family members. And the way that you want to take care of them, make sure that they're safe and they're healthy, is the same way we would want to make sure that our children are safe and healthy and have safe and healthy places to play. And when we don't do that, what I have found happens is that people take risks that are sort of unnecessary or cause issues. So, for instance, taking off-leash dogs on on-leash parks. And we have a second set of constituent services calls that come in to complain about the fact that dogs are doing that, or that dogs are being walked in certain areas. And sort of that issue is something that can be addressed by creating safe and alternate spaces for them to play. And so Boston should be a city that works for its residents when it comes to safe, accessible places for dogs to play. It doesn't. And I'm hopeful that after this conversation, we can either have a roadmap or some idea of how the city is seeking to change that. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our panelists for being here today.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. Councilor Bork, would you like to offer an opening statement?
Sure, just to say that in my district as well, I see firsthand how much our dogs mean to the families in our district, and how much demand there is for this kind of space. Obviously, the rotating space on the Boston Common is well used and well loved, but you know, there's been a long interest in kind of a space that would actually you know, allow for more permanent off-leash dog usage. And I'm excited that something along those lines is in the Boston Common Master Plan, and I know a lot of our folks have weighed in on that. There's also a lot of interest in adding a dog park up by Charles Gate in my district. But I saw firsthand, some folks know I grew up in Bay Village, and while I was still living there, you know, there was a lot of community effort to put together a small dog park on this sort of corner lot, and it kind of happened with the acquiescence of the city, but not, to Councilor Arroyo's point, with kind of the support. And the reality is that the effort to actually maintain spaces like that is substantial. So I think it is a part of the sort of basic infrastructure of a city where we have and love our dogs. And I also recognize that, you know, from the park's perspective, it needs financial support. And so really just happy to talk about how we can, you know, provide those opportunities a short walking distance from more of our constituents' homes, and what we all need to do together to make that viable and sustainable. So thank you so much to Councilor Arroyo for raising the topic, and to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Bork. Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm delighted to be there. I wanted to congratulate Councilor Arroyo for his leadership on this issue. I have been a huge proponent of dog parks in Boston for my entire duration on this body, and it was 10 years ago this upcoming summer, is August of 2011, where I convened the first meeting looking at identifying and creating some off-leash dog opportunities and a dog run at Millennium Park in West Roxbury. From that, the Southwest Dog Park Association of Boston was born, and I'm delighted that we're going to hear from Kara and Claudia and so many others who've been so instrumental. Obviously, I am, without hesitation, supportive of this idea. We need more. The benefits of dog parks are measurable for public safety, for health, for socialization, not only of dogs, but of their owners as well. Again, the benefits are enormous, and Boston is behind so many other cities in establishing these off-leash recreational areas and safe areas for both dog lovers and those who aren't. These provide real services. The only thing I would say, having been on this body for a while, and in addition to our approach at Millennium Park, there was also a wonderful group in Jamaica Plain that several years ago we identified an area and actually had buy-in from the state to allow for an off-leash area. It is so important in this conversation that we stay united and stay with it. And I've said this to a number of individuals through this process, is that this can't just be a hearing and we all talk to each other and agree with each other and shake hands and call it a day. The work has to continue, because I've seen now twice two very promising dog parks end up being scrapped because of vociferous opposition. So this isn't us versus them. This really needs to be incumbent upon all of us to really illustrate the benefits of dog parks and staying with and staying active and pushing all of us, city leaders, state leaders as well. So thank you again for this opportunity, and look forward to a great hearing.
Thank you, Councilor O'Malley, and just want to say thank you to Councilor Arroyo for bringing this forward. I've worked with the city of Boston on issues impacting our pets, especially dogs, as it relates to the problems we were having several years ago on dogs unfortunately getting electrocuted on some of our sidewalks in the city. But we made great progress on that issue thanks to the city of Boston officials. I'm also a dog owner. My family and I are dog owners. We rescued a dog from South Huntington Avenue at the site there, and our dog is named Curly. It's a little dog. The dog's named Curly, and I wanted to name the dog after James Michael Curley, so it's Molly Curley. So because of being from Jamaica Plain, I felt appropriate to name the dog Curly. Anyway, at this time, let me introduce Commissioner Ryan Woods. Commissioner Woods, thank you for your leadership, and would you like to give an opening statement?
Yes, thank you, Councilor, and thank you, councilors, for your support in this important endeavor. So Boston Parks and Recreation welcomes all residents to enjoy our parks. We are the stewards of a park system and we must cater to a wide section of users. Dogs are welcome in all of our parks as long as rules are followed. So while most dogs may be well behaved, we have to consider the health and safety of others. We want all dog owners, joggers, pedestrians, children, park users to enjoy the time in our parks. There's certainly many benefits to having dog recreation spaces in our parks. One gives dogs a legal area to go off leash. It's positive activation in our parks. We've seen a decline in negative activity in certain parks with the addition of dog owners. These dog owners get to know their neighbors better, feeling a real sense of community. And you see a reduction in dog waste in other neighborhood parks on sidewalks when people have one certain place to bring their dogs in each neighborhood. So with that, the Boston Parks Department recognizes the need to provide space for all. And as such, we're working to have a dog recreation area in each neighborhood. It's very important to say no matter who owns that actual property. As Councilor Arroyo brought up, we actually have 6 dog parks and 1 still piloted off-leash dog area at Boston Common to make a 7th. And there are quite a number of others on Massport land, Mass DOT land, DCR land, and other privately owned lots throughout the city to add to that number. So it's really important that residents can, one, try to find a parcel of land and work with the property owners and make sure that you look into the proximity of neighbors. You don't want to have a dog recreation space right next to a direct abutter with the smells that comes with the dog park, the barking, etc. You don't want to put it in the outfields of athletic fields because it causes divots, sprained ankles, broken legs, etc. You shouldn't put them adjacent to children's playground areas just in case somebody puts their hands through the fence or anything happens like that. And you don't want to have dog areas on slopes or sensitive habitats. We look for a demonstrated community support. So trying to find a civic group, friends group to help with enforcement and programming in each dog recreation space. And just for reference, the latest dog park that was constructed on a City of Boston park was about $250,000 to construct as part of the project. So we are delighted that we did sunset, if you will, Councilor Ross's former ordinance that went in place from 2004 to 14. As Councilor Arroyo mentioned, there was equity issues. That old ordinance in place only had people that had the means and could fundraise, had the ability to implement dog parks in city-owned spaces. That was sunset in 2014. And now we hear from communities in active community processes for designs if they like a dog park in their park. And we try to find an area. Each area that has a dog park also has to have a water source. It's required to have water there for the dogs if they're hot, also to spray down and wash up and be able to clean up each area. We continue to look forward to work with residents to find these spaces in our parks. And, you know, whether it's on state land, city land, or whoever owns it, to try to find and put in a dog park in each neighborhood in the City of Boston. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Woods. At this time, I'd like to ask Alexis Trinsky. Yep, thank you. Can you say it one more time for me?
It's Trzynski.
Brzezinski. Thank you, Alexis. Would you like to give an opening statement? And before that, I just want to say, Alexis, thank you for your important work that you're doing as well.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you, Counselors. Thank you, Commissioner. Animal Care and Control is in favor of additional dog recreation spaces. We've heard from many pet owners that there's a lack of dedicated off-leash spaces that to allow their dogs to be exercised. Certainly in a west part of the city, West Roxbury, Rossi, JP, we've heard that there is no space for the owners to exercise their dogs. Animal control officers are better positioned to have a conversation with dog owners who exercise their dogs in violation of the ordinance if there are areas where they can direct them. We think that the creation of additional recreation spaces are helpful for both proponents and persons who are not necessarily interested in that they don't have dogs, because there's a expected park usage if we have those dedicated spaces. The division feels that we would certainly benefit from an active group, which could aid in self-monitoring, similar to the relationship that we have with the Rough in the North End Deep Legal Dog Park. Again, in Boston, well-constructed, well-managed dog parks where users bring socially appropriate dogs with adequate supervision and appropriate human to animal ratios can only benefit in the City of Boston.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexis. Thank you for testifying and for your work. At this time, I'm going to open it up to questions from my colleagues. I just want to check to see if anyone else has joined us. I don't believe so at this time. Maybe I'll start first, and then I'll ask Councilor Arroyo to go after. To Commissioner Woods or to Alexis, can you talk about, and I should mention, I'm also proud that we have the, as Commissioner Woods mentioned, the dog park in South Boston off of First Street. I know the BPDA in the Parks Department are also working with the Bay Village Neighborhood Association, potential park in the Bay Village. And we also enjoy going over to Peters Park in the south end as well. So to Alexis or to Commissioner Woods, if you designate a certain parcel in a public park for use as a dog park, what is the space that you would need to designate for a dog park in a certain area of a park? And does that mean that if you have a designated spot in that park as a dog park, does that dog then, are they able to use the other part of the park as well? So just want to get your thoughts on that question.
Sure. So if you look at some dog parks, they're all different sizes. And I think you'll hear from dog owners saying the larger the space, the better it is, the bigger runway for dogs to exercise and to run outside. One thing that we look at in certain dog parks, if you look at Peters Park, for example, there's a small dog area versus a large dog area. So that is about 13,000 square feet in that dog park, and it is sectioned off for small dogs and large dogs. But on that same street, on Washington Street, you have Blackstone, Franklin, and the baseball Little League field at Peters that are also used as dog runs, as some dog owners prefer not to use the dog recreation space, whether their dog doesn't behave well with other dogs, or, you know, they may have some concerns or issues that they have. But we still find a lot that it's more based on convenience, that people still go to the nearest green space near their home to exercise their pets. Dogs are welcome in City of Boston pet parks on leash, in off leash, obviously, in the designated dog recreation spaces, which we hope to expand those.
Then my final question before I give it to Councilor Royal, maybe to Alexis. Alexis, if a dog is off the leash, can you talk about the enforcement aspect of that?
If dogs are off leash, the animal control officers at their discretion will either issue a verbal warning or a citation. First offense for an off leash dog is $50. The reason why this hearing is of definite interest to us is it's very difficult for us to interact with residents from an educational platform if we're issuing citations and we have nowhere else for them to go.
Thank you, Alexis. I think that's the most important part, is the educational aspect of educating everybody about dog parks, the rules, the regulations, and the health and safety. Again, I love dogs, and I've seen firsthand the impact dogs have, especially service dogs, in helping our disabled veterans, which is a very important subject for me as a disabled veteran. But I really appreciate the care also and the training that these dogs have, and the comfort and the comfort they provide our disabled veterans and persons with disabilities as well. Having said that, Councilor Arroyo, thank you for your leadership on this and opening up for questions.
Thank you so much. And my questions at this moment are mostly for Commissioner Woods. So first off, thank you for that answer. As somebody who is currently the city councilor for District 5 and is advocating for dog parks in the neighborhood, I have pretty basic questions that hopefully we can get through, which is, the first is, can you just detail for me, as the city of Boston is doing dog parks, right? You kind of listed out what wouldn't qualify as a space, right? These certain places that are not correctly environmentally or geographically predisposed for this. But if we were to create a dog park, if I said to Commissioner Woods, I would like a dog park in Hyde Park, what steps would you need to take to make that happen from beginning to the final one, which is, I guess, a budgeting one? But from the beginning standpoint of that, what steps would you need to say, this is a site, we approve this site, we get to get us all the way from initial request to final destination, which is an open dog park?
Sure. So it would start by identifying some land in the park and who the landowner is. Is it a DCR land? Because I believe specifically in Hyde Park, there was a big push for DCR land spot to have one. One of the challenges in Hyde Park for us is we only own 3 properties. The majority of all the parks in Hyde Park are owned by the state. So we only have Amatucci, Iacono, George Wright Golf Course, and then Ross. And for Ross, we had a lot of opposition at the community meetings from the abutters asking not to put one in that neighborhood park. So the leadership at the time decided to go along with the abutters in the community for that one design. But we always try to find an area. And I'm just giving a prime example for Rosendale in your district. A resident has reached out to us, found a prime location behind the Flaherty Pool at it's Healy Field in Rosendale. And we're working with the abutters, which is the housing authority, housing development behind it, to make sure they're fully supportive since they're the closest abutters. After that, so we're going to have a community process with meetings to have a discussion. And from that, we're going to put a suggestion into the budget if it gets funded to add a dog park behind the community pool in Roslindale. So it's really just to get the community support and make sure we have a group behind it, because it is self-enforced by the dog owners. They're the ones activating the space. Some of them have Halloween parties where they decorate their dog. It really is a sense of community. So we'd love to see it added. We just like to have that group behind it that if there's any issues, they can call us and we have that relationship with them. And as I mentioned, it's about $250,000 on average to bring the water, put up the fences, have the pea stone to make a dog park come to fruition funding wise.
I appreciate that answer. And then just to get back to that other one, the point you raised, which is Hyde Park and the city's lack of sort of land that they own here. I think 70% of Hyde Park open land is actually owned by DCR. I was actually a supporter of that dog park in the Thompson area. It was very close to my home. It's a perfect space for something like that. Here's a question I have for you, just on some of the pushback that I know I've received when I've spoken to the state about this. Has there ever been a mutual contract where the state has helped fund or lease land for a dog park and the city has taken care of maintenance and upkeep? Has that ever happened? Is that something we could do?
So right now, the maintenance and upkeep of dog parks is done by the dog groups. It's not done by City of Boston employees. So right now, we don't have that model anywhere in place. Dog parks are maintained, enforced, programmed by the community groups that rally around them. Our maintenance crews more do the mowing of the lawns, the emptying of the trash barrel, getting, whether it's fields ready, fixing broken equipment. But right now, we don't have any positions designated for dog parks. It's all done by the community organizations.
And with that model where the community has largely been responsible for the maintenance, has there been any issues with that, or have they essentially met that challenge?
So 3 of them are very new. So of the 4 that we had in place before that, there hasn't been many issues. And if there was an issue, we have a direct contact with a group that's able to help rectify the situation. I should mention there's also foundations that some of these community groups apply to. So only 2 communities have actually raised money to build their own dog park. That's Peters and then Ronan Park in Meeting House Hill area of Dorchester were the only 2 that self-raised money. And for Ronan Park, they received some money from the Stanton Foundation that helped fund that effort. But they have signage up. Again, they program their own. It's more scoop the poop type of language and encouraging dog owners to pick up after their dogs. We have not seen a large problem with the 4 that we had in place for years.
And so I guess for in terms of state and city partnership, because there are several, for instance, I believe the East First Street one is run by Massport, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and so there's a few that are run by state agencies. Would there be any issue if the state were willing to open up a space in Hyde Park on some of that public land that they own? Would there be any legal complication or any legal reason for which the city could not partner with the state to bring something to bear in any of those spaces? Is it just a matter of—
I would just have to, I don't know about legal ramifications. I'd have to check with our legal department on. We don't have that model in place, but typically right now, DCR maintains all DCR property. City of Boston maintains their own. So I will happy to run that through our law department if there's any issues.
And then as a last question for this round, so that my other colleagues can kind of get in, from the standpoint of making more dog parks available within city neighborhoods. Right now, there's more city neighborhoods that don't have them than do. The question I have is, in the next fiscal year, this year that we're working on, this budget that we're working on, what plans do we actually have in place currently? I think there's one in Alston, but are there any in Southwest Boston or any of these other neighborhoods that have long not had one? Are there any imminent plans to bring dog parks in this budget?
So in this budget, we're in design for some, and in those design meetings, it may come up that somebody wants a dog recreation space. That may mean like taking out a soccer field or a baseball field in order to put this in certain parks, as our parks are pretty much developed. But the only one that is in process right now is Smithfield Phase 2 in Alston, close to Harvard University. That is one that is funded. Also got some money, I believe, from the Neighborhood Improvement Fund from Harvard to help fund that effort. But that is the only one that I know that is actually in the process. Others may have come up in the community design. We're in design for 11 or 12 parks across the city right now.
11 or 12 dog parks?
11 or 12 parks, period. And if in those parks, if the community asks during the community process for a dog recreation space, in those conversations, that's something that we would attempt to get funded for construction.
If you don't mind, could you just name those parks? I know this is going to be watched by many people who are advocating for dog spaces, if they just know to get involved in that process. What parks are those?
I'd have to provide them to you afterwards, Counselor. I don't have the list off the top of my head. Copley Square, I mean, I don't know necessarily if that's one, but that's a project that's going on. Clarendon Street's going on. We just finished Amatucci and Hyde Park. I honestly don't want to skip any off the list, so I'm happy to provide you a full capital.
Is there somewhere where they can find that? Is there like a public space where they can find the list of, if you could just provide that, not if you don't have it right now, but later on, if you could just provide that, that'd be great.
Sure. Yep. The city's budget office has every capital project by department. So it's all there with the full description of what each project is funded for. Happy to provide that link.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Royal. Next up is Councilor Bach, but before I ask Councilor Bach to ask her questions, I wanted to make a major policy announcement that my son reminded me the dog's name is Marley Curly, not Curly Marley. So I wanted to set the record straight. It's actually Marley Curly. So it was an important announcement I had to make during this time. So Councilor Bach, you're next.
No, wouldn't want to stand in the way of that, Councilor Flynn. Ryan, could you speak to specifically the Boston Common Dog Park Master Plan? Is the idea that also would be maintained by local friends groups, or would it be built into the sort of maintenance work that we do at the Common?
No, we would still look to have the same model that we have across the city. So it'd be asking those Common Canine group to be involved with enforcement and programming. I know the Friends of the Public Garden are in favor of having a designated off-leash area because they have had many problems with the pilot off-leash program, with some dogs obviously just not doing well on voice control, or running after certain people. And so I think if you talk to Liz Visa, she'd also say how important it is that made it into the plan.
Absolutely. And one thing I've heard a lot is sort of the need for somewhat different spaces for like large and small dogs, and obviously longer runs for large dogs. And I'm curious how much as a design principle, obviously it depends on the space that you've got available, but like how much that's risen to the fore when the city works on these things.
So I think the largest one is in Peters with the 13,000 square feet. It's more based on when you find an area that doesn't have isn't sloped and meets all the criteria, that's not close to a butter's windows, et cetera, how much space you're able to work with. So we can curtail it to be as small as the one that you mentioned in the Back Bay, in Bay Village, or as large as ones, as Peters Park. It's just, you're taking out that large portion of, public parkland that may have been grass and replacing with pea stone and fencing. And so if there's support for that, we can make it larger. We are finding, for example, Garvey Park in Dorchester just was renovated, $5.1 million renovation. The dog park is on the DCR owned portion of the park. And in that area there, it's we still have people using the artificial turf because they still prefer not to put their dog in the dog recreation space at the same park. They'd rather have the full football field size for their dog to run on. So it varies in sizes, but we do still have areas where there is dog recreation spaces and parks and people are still choosing to use the tot lot that might be fenced in or the little league that might be fenced in to exercise their dog as there's a larger footprint.
I see. And then in terms of in terms of dog waste receptacles, and there's a larger conversation with Public Works around about whether that's something that we should have around neighborhoods, specifically within your brief, when we have a dog park, is it a piece of that we want a separate receptacle for dog waste, or are we fine with just having trash that it goes in, or how does the city think about that important, somewhat unappealing aspect of all of it?
It is all put in the same trash barrel, but there are designated trash barrels put inside the fencing of the dog recreation space or right outside. Usually it's a whole station, if you will, with a pole that comes with the doggy baggies in case somebody forgot them as well. And we do have those in regular parks that don't have dog recreation spaces because friends groups or communities have requested dog dispensers, and we are happy to provide them, especially if there's a neighbor that's close by, that if it runs out, we're happy to leave refill bags if they get to it quicker than us, or we can refill it through 311. But there are, barrels specified that are assigned right to the dog recreation spaces. So owners have no excuse then to, dispose the waste right there at the actual dog space.
Got it. Yeah. No, and I have to ask Public Works for some solutions on that front in the neighborhood, but that's a separate issue. I just wanted to second Councilor Arroyo's point. I do think that, so in my district, there's a Charles Gates, sort of the area where it's where the Muddy River meets the Charles, and it should be where the Jewel of the Emerald Necklace, the fence, meets the Esplanade. And as you know, it got sort of interrupted by our highway projects, and we've been working with parks and lots of other folks at the state to sort of think about how to reimagine that. There is a vision there for a dog park as a piece of what might go, especially because there's a section that it's kind of under a piece of the highway ramp, and so it's sort of buffered from immediate abutting windows, and it's not a great place to grow a lot of grass, but it could be a really good big zone. And I want to underscore that I think that project is at the intersection of a bunch of jurisdictions, and there's no way we'll get it to happen without major state participation and leadership. It's not something the city can shoulder because the jurisdictions, but at the same time, I can't imagine us being successful without there being a partnership with the city. So just really want to underscore, I feel like in solving this problem for our constituents, people don't know or necessarily care whether it's ours or the state's. They just want the amenity opportunity. So definitely looking forward to continue working with you on that. Mr. Chairman, I think those are my main questions and comments for now.
Thank you, Councilor Bork. Next up, Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a little known fact that Mayor Curley had a dog named Flynn, so this is all coming full circle now. I will be brief because I want to hear from some of our advocates, and I want Chris to show us that beautiful lab that was on his lap earlier. I hope he or she will be testifying as well. But obviously, Commissioner, mill bill, other important things, and Chris, you've just been such a dynamo in parks. And
Matt, I think you're frozen there on the screen.
how's this?
Matt, I think you're frozen on the
Can
screen.
you hear me, Mr. Chair?
We didn't hear you the last minute, but give it a shot now, Matt.
All right, how about now?
No, we still can't hear you.
I'll log off and log back on. Stand by.
Okay. I think we're just waiting for a minute for Councilor O'Malley before we get a response from the commissioner, but then we'll go to the invited guests as well. And we're also available to take public testimony. And that's also an important part of the hearings as well, public testimony and the educational aspect of it. So we will get to public testimony. If you could just hold on for us, we will get to you. I think Councilor O'Malley is back on now. Hey, Councilor O'Malley. Okay, Councilor O'Malley left. I'm going to go, at this time, I'm going to go to the testimony from the Community Advocates panel. Okay, I'm sorry, Councilor Arroyo?
Just, I had one follow-up question for Commissioner Woods.
Okay.
He mentioned that where there have been dog parks, there have been a noted difference in the amount of, say, complaints about dog waste on sidewalks and things like that. Are there other benefits to the community similar to that I would call, adjacent benefits that come with having a designated place for dogs to sort of play and congregate? The dog waste one comes to mind, but are there any other notable changes, things that we can verify when we open dog parks? You see less of that in that area?
Sure, I can just read back some of the benefits I mentioned. One, besides giving a legal area, having positive activation in parks limits negative activity. So for example, the one at Garvey Park used to be an area that was known for drug activity and opioid usage. And now on that DCR land, they created a dog park. So you don't see that negative activity anymore. And there's people there from 6 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night utilizing these parks for positive activity. Once dog walkers are in parks, they serve as the eyes and ears. So while they're there, they can see whether somebody's graffiti or if there's broken glass, and they're utilizing the 311 app to report other issues, where if there was not a dog space in that park, they may not be there at the time to report those emergencies in the parks. So we see a decline in negative activity and the benefit of getting to reach out to other neighbors. When dog owners are together in the space, that sense of community that they feel when they're together, have something in common, shared ideas, and coming up with programming. So these groups are forming together and creating positive programming in parks too, whether it be a dog parade. And I know the group at South End has worked with some private companies where they've had dog biscuit days and handout to everybody. So you see a lot of positive activity in the community spirits, if you will.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Woods, for that. That to me sounds like a lot of bang for buck when we're talking about what these spaces can give neighborhoods. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I see Councilor O'Malley is back.
Yes, Councilor O'Malley is back. I know Councilor Flaherty is in here as well. Councilor O'Malley, before we go to the next panel, I wanted to give you the opportunity to ask your question, Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. How's the sound? How's the visual? Everything good?
Perfect.
Good. And in that time, Chris has brought another dog before him, so I will be mercifully brief. And just to follow on the best, and I know this from experience, best enforcement against people not picking up after their dogs are other dog owners. I've seen it firsthand. It really is. It's a way to sort of enforce it, make sure it's done well. So Chris, it was probably a decade or so ago when Mike Ross put forth what we typically rely on is the blueprint for establishing dog parks, which creates, of course, having a friends of group. And I expect Claudia is going to talk a little bit about that. It's a very high bar. It's a higher bar than we obviously ask for any other sort of outdoor recreational space. And I'm hopeful that we can make that easier. But until we get to the point that I think many of us agree, which is the importance and efficacy of having a off-leash dog park in every neighborhood, can you talk a little bit about what the process would be looking like to establish city-sanctioned off-leash hours in parks? We're seeing it happen organically, and obviously it can sometimes lead to issues between dog owners and non-dog owners. But I wonder if an immediate step, something that we could be looking at now, and I haven't asked Kara this, but she's a dear friend and constituent. I would venture a guess that the MSPCA has seen an increase in adoptions this year with more and more people being from home. So we are seeing the number of dog owners in the city rise considerably and pet owners. But can you just briefly talk, Ryan, about how we're able to get maybe some designated off-leash hours in existing parks?
I think you froze again, Council, but I heard the gist of the question, so I think I can respond. Yes, so we are willing to do that. We have done it with the Friends of the Public Garden and the Common Canines groups. There is off-leash hours. We have put that in place. That's been in place for almost 10 years. I know it has not worked. It's been successful to a degree, but there have been problems with it. So that's why the Friends are pushing for that designated space. But to your point, until we can get to those designated spaces, I think the city is, or the Parks Department at least, is willing to consider off-leash hours, especially at a place like Millennium or an area where that activity happens. I think we'd start with a community briefing to find out what hours that could work for it. For example, is it like a 6 to 7 a.m. and again in the evenings when people are home from work that we do that, or have designated hours depending for each location. I think we'd be open to that, but obviously we'd want to have a community conversation to get the weigh-in from the entire community on that.
Great, thank you for that, and certainly count me as among the voices that is looking, particularly in West Roxbury, Millennium would be one, some number of places in JP, as a temporary measure, and then looking forward to supporting this going forward. That's all for now, Mr. Chair. I apologize for my unstable internet here at City Hall, but I look forward to continuing to watch and participate.
Thank you, Councilor O'Malley. I would like to give my colleague, Councilor Flaherty, a brief opportunity to weigh in. He just joined us. Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been in the waiting room, so I'd rather just. Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. It's a little broken up, Councilor, but go ahead, please.
So I've been listening intently. I've been in the waiting room trying to get on through some technical difficulties. So I'm going to defer my questions. Some of my questions were already asked and answered by our colleagues. I'd love to give the advocates an opportunity to be heard here, and I'll stay on and listen to the testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Appreciate it. Appreciate your leadership too on support of dog parks across the city. At this time, we do have some community advocates as part of this panel. Kara Holmquist, who Councilor O'Malley already mentioned, is the Director of Advocacy for the Massachusetts Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. Thank you for being here with us. Claudia Dunn is the Vice President of the Dog Park Association of Southwest Boston as well. I'm going to give both of you the opportunity to provide an opening statement. If there's anyone else as part of this panel, just let me know. But I do have Kara and Claudia. So at this time, Kara, would you like to provide an opening statement?
Sure. Thank you, Councilor Flynn, Councilor Arroyo, Councilor Bach, Councilor Flaherty, and city officials here to talk about this issue. We have worked on this. I have worked on this for many years. I was involved with the 2004 ordinance that was mentioned. And I think just overall, it's really nice to be on this call. Would rather be in person, but it's nice to I feel that there's a greater, I feel like there's just more positivity than there was back then. And it's really nice to see, all of the support, and that it's, not just, should we do this, but it's more now just figuring out, the details, like where and how, and working with the different areas that might be available. In 2004, we were talking about, how other cities of our size were pulling ahead. And, it's really nice to see Boston is catching up, and appreciate that. I was a resident of District 5 for many years, and so worked with Claudia a bit on the Thompson property and trying to get that going, and have been, as Councilor O'Malley mentioned, involved with those meetings that he started way back when, it seems. So we're very happy to help organize. We have a behavior team. We have folks that can help with education. As Alexis mentioned, it's important that these are socially acceptable animals, and that people are responsible. And it all works well, which we've seen is completely possible. And we're happy to help sort of with that implementation. And if there's anything that we can do, we're around, and we have been very busy, as Councilor O'Malley is correct, as usual. And we have been very busy with people adopting animals, and the veterinary side too has been extremely busy everywhere, just huge demand, and we're trying to make sure that people can get in. But it's this period has been, people are working really hard with new animals and keeping the veterinary care going. So so thank you again, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and happy to help after this call.
Thank you, Kara. Thank you for your important work. Next up, I'd like to ask Claudia if she'd like to provide an opening statement as well.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me to speak on behalf of the Dog Park Association. We have been basically dormant the last 3 years, but we, as Matt said, back in 2011, he called the first meeting. And from that point on, there's been a slew of people with a core group of us who've worked on it from 2011 till 2017, originally starting with talk about Millennium Park, but for various reasons, that wasn't feasible at that point in terms of building a dog park. We found and identified the Stony Brook Reservation and the Thompson Center, which had been abandoned, closed because of the 1990 Disabilities Act that said you could no longer have separate facilities for children with disabilities. It's 9 acres, fenced in, although a lot of the fence is broken. It is filled with graffiti. The amount of work we did is rather extraordinary. Everything from, we formed an official nonprofit status to do this work, and created groups. We recruited people. We began writing a proposal for the Thompson Center to restore it as use as a dog park, but a multi-use park that would have other things for different uses, but also that it would be, we wanted to put in spaces for those who had service dogs, for example. So they would have a place to take their dogs to exercise. The fact that it was built for those with disabilities made it accessible for people, even not veterans, but people who might have dogs who are in wheelchairs. We would have a small park, a part for small dogs, a part for large dogs, but also walking trails. Many people, myself included, want to go someplace where we can walk or exercise with our dogs, not stand and watch our dogs play. So I think the need for multiple kinds of parks is important to consider, which is why off-leash areas is really important, and having some, again, the benefits of dog ownership partially is it's a huge stress reducer for people. We wrote the proposal. We entered into an MOU with the Department of Conservation and Recreation. We raised $10,000 and which was matched by the department with $20,000 to hire a feasibility team and then a design team. Meanwhile, we had online petitions. We did door knocking in the neighborhoods, talking to people who said, please do something there. There were fires. It's an area that is filled with glass and graffiti, some of which was beautiful. And one of our ideas for the park too was we could have a summer program for teenagers and hire them, like the mural crew, training kids to work with animals. We had a very robust plan that we wrote up, and we worked on, and again, we worked with members of Hyde Park who were there's a small but vociferous group that were opposed to this. But we worked with them. We were going to put in things that would address their needs as well. And we were blocked. Basically, the state rep at that time, for some reason, was not in support. I think there was a group of people who said they didn't want it, and he went with them, but he never met with us. He never spoke to us. He did not respond to the letters, calls from his own constituents. And at the 11th hour, when DCR was supposed to unveil the two design plans for the community to vote on, they were informed at the 11th hour that there was a law, from 1967, Chapter 750, that required the Thompson Center be used only for the care and recreation of disabled children. However, that's no longer a legal use, but it put the whole project, the calabash on it. So it was just, the rug was pulled out from under everyone who'd spent, countless hours. An alternative site was offered, but nothing ever came of that. The Dog Park Association, often we did cleanups at Millennium Park every year, going around picking up, as people say, dog poop, but all the other things that accumulate. And yeah, we were very much, those of us who walk at Millennium are very much sometimes called the poop police, because we're continually either offering people bags or reminding people to pick them up. And again, there was a really dedicated group. And I will say, with the pandemic, there is a huge group of what we're calling pandemic puppies. Everywhere I go, at every park, you see them. So you have a lot of new dog owners who need to be educated, help with dog training. And I would say dog owners are a constituency whose needs have not been met by the city. There are multiple parks, multiple acres of parks for every other activity use constituents that you would possibly hope for. And so in terms of equity and fairness and all the other reasons people have mentioned, until we do provide places for dog owners to go, there continue to be off leash in areas that people don't want them to be. It's just how human beings operate, and that's the nature of it. And so that's a really brief overview of a lot of effort and time and various strategies we put into effect, but I'm happy to answer any and all questions. We did a lot of research about dog park design across the country and what makes for good dog parks, what makes for bad dog parks. And there are a lot of people who really, really need this and support it.
Thank you. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Karen. Just want to, before I open it up to my colleagues, just want to say thank you to your leadership, but also for the important work of making sure that our parks and open spaces are inclusive, especially for persons, including persons with disabilities as well, who rely on dogs, service dogs. They play a critical part of that family. And so we want to say thank you to you, but also to the trainers and those that take great care in educating and training those dogs. But having said that, let me go to my colleagues for questions to the community advocates. Let me start with Councilor Arroyo. Councilor Arroyo.
First and foremost, thank you both so much for being here. I know one of you is actually using your vacation to be here, so thank you so much for that. And in terms of my questions, you can hear mine. My dogs are right now making themselves known. I'm lucky and blessed that I have sort of a front area that's fenced in so that they can run around and play in with each other. But most of the city, I would assume, does not actually have that. In fact, one of the things that is deeply concerning to me is as we continue to build and develop in the city of Boston, what we're really building and developing is condominiums, apartment buildings, things of that nature, where we really don't have yards or open space. And so as we bring more density to the city of Boston, and as everybody's mentioned, with pandemic puppies on the rise, but I think pet ownership has always been a relatively high thing. I remember almost all of my friends having pets when I was growing up, whether they say license them with the city or not. And so the number of pets, I think, in the city have always been high. I think we're certainly on a high point in terms of what's happened with the pandemic and folks adopting more animals, which I think is a very positive thing. But I do worry about sort of the lack of natural space for them to play. And so that's a major reason for why I'm doing this work. But for Kara, I have two questions, and I'm going to ask them now, and then you can answer them, and then that's it. For Kara, one of my first questions really is, what are the benefits to the animals in terms of having a legitimate space where they can socialize, play, be healthy? And I'm thinking about that both from early years where we're pandemic puppies, but also our senior dogs, our dogs who have several years in. What are the benefits to them health-wise, socially? How does it improve the quality of life for them? Because I do think as a city, we need to be looking at not just the quality of life of residents, but also the quality of life of the animals that call Boston home. And I think taking care of the quality of life of those animals is taking care of the quality of life of their humans. And I think that's a really important thing for us to do. So if you could just list the reasons why that's crucial in terms of these spaces for dogs. And then for Claudia, thank you so much for that fight. I actually lived 3 or 4 streets down, and I was in full support of that. I was off of Alwyn Street, which is actually right there. And I remember the efforts that you put in and others put in for the dog park. And it was unfortunate, frankly. I have other choice words for it, but it was unfortunate that it did not happen. And so I think from the standpoint of your experience with that, because I'm aware of just how difficult that was, and it did feel like a handful of folks stopped thousands of people. I think the question that I have for you, Claudia, is what are ways in which, as a city councilor, but also as a city, we can make it easier for these private organizations that are organizing to bring dog parks? What ways can we offer real partnership? We know that Commissioner Woods brought up finding locations and things like that, and I think that's part of the battle. But I think there's also other things that probably you've learned along the way, where if the city were able to make these things more accessible, whatever they may be, whether it's work forms or who to contact or what that is, it would make this process better. And I would be really interested in just hearing from you what those things might be. And then I'm done. And so thank you both for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. And it's I don't think we've met in person, but it's nice to see that the dog gene runs in your family. I've known your brother for a while and his dogs. So yes, and I will submit written testimony also, and I will include some additional information from our veterinary staff about sort of all of the benefits. I mean, I think one of the benefits that we see the most, is that dogs get their exercise in a different way that they can't necessarily get on leash, and that they socialize with other dogs and develop skills. Obviously, it's important that they are okay in that type of setting. It can be stressful for some dogs, so having people understand their dogs and that they will work well in that type of area. And I think, when it's possible, having the large and small dogs separate areas is important to try to put the smaller dogs so that they're not in a position where they're fearful of the larger dogs. But the socialization is certainly important, and the health benefits, the exercise is important. And obviously those things are good for us too when we have good dogs or tired dogs. And it's hard to separate the benefits to the dogs, entirely from the community benefits that we all get from talking to other people in the dog park. And I think those of us who have gone to dog parks, meet some of our neighbors and sometimes our closest friends, and we don't know each other's names maybe sometimes, but the dogs, it's really a great sense of community. But I think the benefit for exercise and then socialization for the dogs are the main points, but I'll definitely provide some more detail from our veterinarians and our behaviorists. And I just wanted to mention that something that I think about a lot when people talk about dog parks that you mentioned is just that, in our more urban areas, that we just having a fenced in yard, and I was fortunate to have a small one on the corner of Cornell and Walworth. But I think you're right, not many people have that. And with the development, I think it's just going to be something that is going to be more common. So having those spaces where they can run around is important. And also, I think this is hard to, when you have been to a dog park and watched those dogs, there's just something so joyful about seeing, the pure happiness that they experience too, which is obviously, just knowing that they are, acting as dogs should and having the space to run. It's really, it's quite fun to watch in addition to all the other benefits.
Thank you. Thank you, Kara. I know Councilor Bach stepped off for another meeting, as did Councilor O'Malley. Maybe I'll ask a brief question before we go into public testimony, or I'll just go back to Councilor Arroyo if he has follow-up questions to the panelists.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I could just, I think Ms. Dunn had a question that I had put on the floor for her about how the city could work better with groups trying to do this. And I know she has some models, I think, about this, but also I would really appreciate her insight if she could just be given an opportunity to answer that.
Yes, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I can also provide myself and some of the other people from our group provide some written testimony, but I think it would be really helpful. One, when people are starting these nonprofits, is some help and guidance in just the mechanics of starting a friends of and a nonprofit. You have to create a nonprofit. I also think helping with the messaging and helping with, bridging between, making that bridge between people who don't own dogs or don't support dog parks, so that it shouldn't be a us versus them kind of thing. It's how do we coexist? We have to coexist in, parks for, you have to avoid bicyclists sometimes, but how do we coexist? How do we get a message out? And how do we navigate some of the bureaucratic and political landscapes? We were very lucky. Karen Jones, who's our president, was very skilled at this and had a lot of experience in that area. And actually and knew some people. So one of the things we were able to do was, with working with DCR, was she had some relationships. And we know that a lot of this work in community organizing and political work is about relationships and knowing who the right person to talk to. So that kind of support, I think, is really helpful. I think there are other things, but again, I'd be happy to kind of think about them more and maybe write those up and get input from other people as well. And because I think there's a variety of things. It took us a while to, gel together as a group and also figure out how to focus our energies. But, we did a lot of work together. Again, I think it's just, there's a steep learning curve.
Thank you so much for that. And I see the rest of whatever time I may have for this hearing, Mr. Chair, so that we can hear from the testifiers.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. Thank you, Claudia. And I just wanted to follow up briefly on Claudia's comments. I think one aspect of this discussion is really the communication, understanding, education between dog owners and non-dog owners about the role of a dog park and the rules of a dog park and the rules outside of a dog park. And I think if everyone follows them, I think would be much better off. But again, it's a public awareness education campaign. As the district city councilors know well, Councilor Arroyo knows well, I certainly do, and the others, our job is really bringing people together, especially people that may have a different opinion about a particular subject. So that's something I do want to focus on as we go forward sometime in the future on this debate. But having said that, let me go directly now into public testimony. And there are several people that have raised their hand. And if I could ask if we could try to keep it under 2 minutes for public testimony, I will not cut you off, but if you are able to keep it under 2 minutes, that would be appreciated so we can get as many people as we can. At this time, could I ask Chris, I think you have your hand raised, Chris. Chris Arena, would you like to testify?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And thank you, esteemed counselors, many of whom I have built a personal relationship with over the last couple of years, advocating for dogs and animals in the city. I moved to Boston 5 years ago from Washington, D.C., where I had worked in a career in politics and marketing for several years. Lived in Alston when I first came here and got involved in that Smithfield conversation very early on for phase 2 to advocate for dog parks. Because the first thing I noticed in the city is when I would visit friends in Dorchester, Mattapan, Roslindale. At the time I was living in Alston or JP, there was nowhere I could take my dog. I will also note that I have a silent participator here who's a little shy and is not going to leave her commentary, but Joy also is in support of advancing dog parks in the western side of the city. I am a Roslindale condo owner now, a couple of years after I got priced out of the neighborhood and bought in Rossi. I'm on the mayor's animal commission as well. I serve on the commission to advocate for animals in the city. And I am a foster family. My partner and I are a foster family through Last Hope Canine. Both of our dogs are rescues. I've had dogs my entire life and rescued dogs as much as I physically possibly could. My latest endeavor has been working with Commissioner Woods and Alexis and Parks about Healy Field, which Commissioner Woods mentioned earlier in this meeting, to try to identify a site on this part of, in my neighborhood in Roslindale. It's unfortunate that we have more roller hockey rinks in the neighborhood than dog parks, coming from a hockey player who also uses that rink as well, because hockey players and dog owners also vote. I think through my experiences in Alston, where we initially got 350 signatures to build the dog park in Lower Alston along DCR land on the river, which took 3 years, and eventually got tabled by DCR, a very similar experience to what Claudia went through, tabled indefinitely, and essentially the project was killed. There seems to be a lot of passion and a lot of interest around whether it's adaptive reuse of fields, like let's say making ball fields, dog fields in the off season, or building dog parks in underrepresented areas like Millennium Park. But the issue that I've found in every single advocacy, both in DC and in Boston, is going from passion to action, right? Going from the 300, 400, 500 signatures that you can get and setting up these meetings and having these conversations to actually putting a line item in the budget. And that very simple step is an extraordinarily difficult step. And I don't really know what that thread is. And so the reason I wanted to leave my insights, join this meeting, leave public comment is that as someone who's been involved both in the dog fostering community, dog advocacy and animal control community, is a dog parent of 2 dogs, and an activist in the city and an active voter, even I can't figure out how to go from, I know everyone in my neighborhood wants a dog park, to how do we get one? And that's through no fault of the system. I do think, though, that it would be, especially as we're talking about the budget now, it would behoove the city to think about whether it's this year or next year, actionable line items that we can dedicate to the western half of the city. I think, particularly Mattapan, Hyde Park, Roslindale, and Jamaica Plain, quite frankly, and Alston Brighton, although I think Smithfield will be a wonderful, I've seen the plans for that, and it's what Ryan had talked about, a big side and a small side for dogs. It's about 30,000 square feet. That's what we need. And DCR, unfortunately, in many of my cases in the state, are not as easy to work with as the city. So I hope that we can get an investment in actionable budget items out of these meetings. And thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. How about Roberta Hankin? Roberta, would you like to testify? If you're able to keep it under 2 minutes, that would be great. Hi, Roberta.
Sorry. Okay, I'm here.
Okay, hi, Roberta. Go ahead,
Hi.
please.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak today. I'm Roberta Hankin. I'm a new resident of JP, and I was drawn to this community and this neighborhood through its or by its abundance of green space, its reputation for the emphasis on the importance of community. So I, like so many who are here today, am one who rescued a dog during the pandemic. And like many of my neighbors here today, I see the incredibly great need for spaces where our new and sometimes fragile dogs can exercise freely. I'm proud to join with a coalition of neighbors who are advocating today for dog parks in JP. We're committed to this cause, and we're willing to join with state and local officials to ensure that these proposed spaces are safe and clean, and they follow the examples of the best practices that are out there for such spaces. We're enthusiastic about this prospect of creating a local board of residents who are willing to partner with public agency staff charged with the creation and maintenance of our dog parks. We look forward to working with you to make this desire and this request a reality. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Roberta. Melinda is up next. Hi, Melinda. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Melinda.
Okay, so sorry you can't see me. I have no idea how to do this. All right, just a second. Audio. Okay, just let it be. All right, so today I have joined with the group of Jamaica Plain activists who were calling on dog parks. However, I live in Rosendale, and I just wanted to be in an effort to also include Rosendale on this issue. Three key issues came up, which is the fact that, and I realize that some of them were illegal. There's been a loss of space. Both the Arboretum now is actively ticketing people who put their dogs off leash, which I was not aware of. I've been a dog owner in Boston since 2001. And when I was living at Archdale, the Arboretum on the Rosendale side was where my two terriers grew up. So I was totally unaware of it until about 6 weeks ago when my current terrier and I were ticketed. So then the Forest Hill Cemetery has no longer allows people to even have dogs on leash going into the Forest Hill Cemetery. It was alluded to several times before that there's the increased dog space, that there's increased there are more dogs, the pandemic dogs, and this leaves less places in Rosendale and the Jamaica Plain area for dogs to go. The one thing I did want to add to this is that I do not have a service dog. My husband and I do qualify, but due to income restrictions, we have not been able to ever have a service dog because it's prohibitive. And we both have post-traumatic stress disorder and other issues. I am physically disabled, and but my dog has been an emotional support animal. All the dogs have been to us and have helped us through very, very hard times, such as the death of our two children, one in Iraq and one to suicide, as well as after the Boston Marathon bombing. The dogs, I swear, practically wore out when those first two dogs passed away because they took care of us so much. And my current dog is also an emotional support animal. I'm bringing this up because there are a lot of people living with disabilities. They may be invisible disabilities or visible disabilities. And we know that our dogs need to let out that energy. They take up a lot of energy when they're emotional support animals or even when they're service animals from the people they care for. And they need to have that release. And one thing that I also want to say as a positive especially with my newer dog who I got as a puppy. She was socialization skills and being able to behave better results from being able to have her be with other dogs. Okay, if you ever have read the Susan Milan series on books, his books, they totally explain how good behavior is reinforced by having dogs be socialized among other dogs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Melinda, for your testimony, your important testimony and your support for persons with disabilities, but also I know your family's tremendous sacrifice for our country, and your advocacy, your family's advocacy as well for our disabled veterans community across the country. So we just want to say thank you for your tremendous work in assisting persons with disabilities. Could I ask the next person to testify? I'm probably not going to pronounce the person's name correctly, but it's Alana Olofsson. Alana?
Yes, so I'm trying. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you for testifying.
Oops, of course. I will set my timer for myself. I would like to very, very highly reflect what Ms. Arendo just said, because a lot of dog owners, including myself, have disabilities that you might not see on the outside, or might not be apparent, because I am a young Boston citizen of the last 10 years. Today's actually my 30th birthday, and this is what I chose to do for the last hour and a half, and as long as it was necessary, because it's so important. I am also a dog parent, from like a pandemic dog parent, but I've always had dogs, and especially times like now in the pandemic, I have found going to dog parks to be an incredible source of energy for physical and mental health for all the dog owners. I mean, everyone's smiling there and everyone talks about how important it is to them, not just their dogs, because of how it makes them feel to have the dogs. And talking about training, as Ms. Arendo was saying, it is incredibly, incredibly key to socialize dogs when you're training. And in order to do that, they need to have freedom to interact with dogs, which a lot of dogs simply they don't have access to if there aren't other dogs at home, and they don't have access to without dog parks. And in this time, I've been going to parks all around the greater Boston area, everywhere from Waltham to Newton to, I go most often to Brookline, and I am willing to pay into these programs that they have. I know, for example, Newton and Brookline specifically have two great parks, the Brookline Ave Playground and Honeywell Park in Newton, but you have to pay into their program. And it's one of those things where, I'm happy, to license my dog in Boston and to pay into that program and to see the money go towards that, if it means the health and well-being of my dog as well as the community dogs. And it's just such an important kind of way for that. I know my family and other friends' families, that we have a community. And I wish it was something that was available here. I'm a resident of Roslindale. I was a JP resident for a few years, and we moved to Roslindale once we were able to buy an apartment. And, we have a driveway, and that's where I have the opportunity to play with my dog. And it's only feasible during the pandemic that we've been able to make these drives to parks that are, half an hour, sometimes an hour away. But that's because I have the privilege of having a car and, being able to work from home and work things around it. And I would just, it's something that I feel super strongly about. I would do whatever I can. I just don't know how to do it, to be a part of this movement and get it going. So I really appreciate, thank you to the JP Dogs group. Honestly, I got through, I found out about everything through Facebook, and for spreading it. And thank you, Commissioner. Thank you everyone for hearing us all out.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, Kalija. If I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, I apologize.
You know me, Counselor Flynn. It's Kaliga.
Okay, Kalija. How are you?
If you could see my face, because I've been an RN in Boston for over 43 years, and you and I worked together on question 1, which unfortunately didn't pass with the patient-nurse ratio. I was representing the MNA. I was a Boston City nurse that became BMC. I used to work nights on the adult surgical floor and come out and walk dogs because I had a side business at the time. I've been in the pet care business for over 31 years in Boston. Now that's my mainstay. I do train dogs. I was born in Boston, and I was brought home from the hospital to dogs. And for 65 plus years that I have been a proud Bostonian, I have been an advocate for many different things. And here I am advocating for more dog parks because, for one thing, we are the #1 city. I did my research for this meeting. The #1 city in the country, believe it or not, for dog parks is Boise, Idaho. They have 5.7 dog parks per every 100,000 people. Boston, in the latest statistics I could find, ranks 41st. And that's really kind of a travesty because we're a world-class city and we need to bring up our dog park ratio so that we meet the needs of constituents, because there are so many dog families, and furry family members, for most people, have the same standing, or, they are family members, and they do need the recreation that's been brought up, and humans need that. I also researched a lot of articles, and there are some articles which are negative from dog owners. I hate dog parks. Do you know why those negative things occur? Because there are dog owners that are irresponsible and don't follow the rules of dog parks. So when we get dog parks, we need to have a way of enforcing rules. And there's on the internet, you can look up all the rules and regs of dog parks around the country, and we could cull the ones and tailor them to fit Boston as we create more and more dog parks. And there has to be a way of enforcing them because it's humans that ruin things like that. But there are 2 very positive articles that I would like to call attention to. They're simple and direct. One is Dog Parks 101 from 2019 from the Trust for Public Land. Very good article about creating dog parks. And the NRPA, the National Recreation and Park Association, Designing and Managing Innovative Dog Parks from November 2nd, 2018, has really good suggestions and stories about dog parks. And there are many articles. I would say, as we create more dog parks, which we need to be a world-class city and to meet the needs of constituents and taxpayers, that we would have citizens as part of advisory groups who have a stake in it. I think that's very important, that it's not just elected officials or people that are professionals in animal advocacy or in animal control. I think that there should be citizens' voices also. I think that's very important. Another thing I wanted to say, though, since I am an old timer, I guess, is that I would call attention to, I know for animal control, there is a problem at Blackstone that people play off leash, and it's kind of an unofficial dog park. But in the 1970s, Blackstone Park in the South End and across the street, Franklin Square Park, had open drug deals, had broken glass everywhere, fights often, even with knives, and all kinds of things going on in broad daylight. And I am not a proponent of gentrification because I'm an old Bostonian, and I think there's been more negativity than positivity, and some people might disagree. But one of the things that happened is a lot of people came in and they had dogs and they started using the parks with their dogs. And do you know what happens? Because I know that the park commissioner said that there are good things. Crime also decreased in parks when dog owners walk. And I'm also been a volunteer in the Southwest Corridor for over 31 years. And I can tell you that, and at all hours, people walk their dogs in the corridor. And that does deter crime. I know that's state property, but just as an example. So there are a lot of benefits to having dog areas and keeping and retaining citizens who have dogs. That's one of the reasons. Yes, we want good schools. We want parks that all kinds of activities can happen to retain people, to retain good people to live in Boston and put down roots here. And dog parks are another way to do that. And people need to really realize that, because other cities have much more amenities for dog owners. And for someone who loves dogs, as many of us do at this hearing, that's a reason to leave Boston if we don't increase the amount of space so that people can enjoy their dogs and their dogs can have healthy interactions. And that's my testimony.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you for your service as a nurse in the city of Boston. Valerie Barrett is next, and I would ask if people could keep their testimony under 2 minutes so I can get every resident that wants to testify. Valerie, you're next.
Thank you very much. I live in Hyde Park, a current dog owner. I have actually been advocating and organizing within the community for the past year. I've spoken to lots of people that were part of the efforts previously with the Thompson Center. I currently have started a petition a little over a week ago, and it has over 1,000 signatures in a week. So that just shows you right there, people couldn't sign quick enough. And we can tell from this meeting that it obviously has a lot of support, but I think right now where we're at is we don't know where we go from here. So even from this hearing, I was kind of hoping we would figure out, for example, my petition with over 1,000 signatures currently and more every day. Who am I sending that to? And who's going to tell us where to go for the next step? I know, like with the Hyde Park, we have a lot of state land. So who from the state am I supposed to contact from here on how we can work with the city, what space is available? We have tons of space over here in Hyde Park. So it's really hard for us to imagine why we can't easily just come together and find a place for the dogs. I adopted my dog right before COVID and obviously have seen how many people have adopted since then. And I had no idea that owning a dog would be the reason that I finally got out and started meeting my neighbors. I know that's kind of been mentioned here before, but with the pandemic, especially, people wanted to be outside as often as possible. I was out saying hi and meeting lots of other dogs in the neighborhoods, lots of neighbors. And it was constantly being brought up about the non-existent space that we have to bring our dogs. There's no opportunities to socialize. And many people don't have fenced in yards where they can run. So there was a group of us that would often try to meet up during the day at a local park that was never being used. And we really didn't see the harm in letting our dogs play and throw a ball. But of course, it goes against the leash laws. So we were often warned that we needed to leave the park or keep our dogs on leash. But we have no other options. And as was just mentioned previously, the city of Boston is so far behind other major cities when it comes to dog parks. And I've been to cities all over the country where dog parks are such a common, integral part of the city. I currently drive about 25 minutes usually to get to a dog park. I go to Quincy. It's just pretty awful that we have to do that. And a lot of people don't have the options to drive 25 minutes to go to a dog park. So if we had that, there would be less problems with dogs being off leash in areas they aren't allowed. And it really does build a sense of community. Meeting up with fellow dog owners this past year, like we were doing in the park, became such a highlight in my day, and just getting outside and talking to people and watching the dogs play Everyone was happier. It was a great opportunity to trade recommendations for local businesses in the area, whether it's where do you bring your dog for training or daycare, or what company did you use to repair your walkway. That's how I found out about someone in Hyde Park. I just really gained so much by getting outside and talking to the neighbors. And that's what kind of sparked me to get organized and start the petition and kind of start reaching out to people in the city. But I haven't really gotten any further because I feel like we're hit a dead end, and it shouldn't really be up to like community members to have to organize and fight this hard just to get a dog park when other places in the city don't have to do that. The city has people available that can make this happen without us having to fight so hard. But thank you to everyone here at the hearing.
Thank you, Valerie. Next up is Abello. And again, wanted to ask people if they can keep it under 2 minutes. I don't cut people off, but I want to get everyone's testimony. So if we can keep it under 2 minutes. Abello is next, please. Maybe that person is not on. It's Abellew. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next person is Kelly O'Keefe. Hi, Kelly.
Hi there, thank you for your time. My name is Kelly O'Keefe, and I'm a resident of Jamaica Plain and a dog owner of a wonderful rescue dog named Fiona. I feel that there are so many good reasons to add in fenced dog areas to every neighborhood in Boston, many of which have been already mentioned today. But one of those main reasons is equity. Many of us do not have the luxury of a private fenced-in yard for our dogs to exercise in safely, nor a car to drive to a dog park located in another out-of-range area. I know I don't. In contrast, I can walk a few blocks in any direction and find a playground, which is a safe and secure place for children of the community to play and exercise in. Yet there are no safe and secure places for dogs of the community to be found. Why the disconnect? With over 7,000 dogs licensed in the city in 2020, the existing amenities for tax-paying dog owners do not currently meet our population's needs and haven't for a long time. As such, my family is strongly in support of installing a minimum of one city-sponsored fenced-in dog area per neighborhood within the city of Boston. Jamaica Plain in particular has been trying to get one in the neighborhood for years now, and concrete plans were even drawn up with DCR, but were stalled a few years ago with no action since. We'd like to see plans move forward as soon as possible so that JP's 1,000+ dogs finally have a safe and accessible place to be, and we like to see the same for all neighborhoods in Boston. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. Melissa Hamill. Hi, Melissa.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine, Melissa.
Okay, great. First of all, thank you to Councilor Arroyo and everyone who's attending this meeting. I represent the Friends of JP Dog Parks, and a couple of our members have already spoken, and I just want to reiterate that we have over 500 members of our Friends group. We recently had a petition circulated online, and we're able to get 540 signatures in favor of building a dog park in Jamaica Plain, and that happened only over the course of a few weeks as well. Currently, there are 0 dog parks in Jamaica Plain, yet there are plenty of other recreational facilities throughout the neighborhood that unfortunately don't benefit dog owners. So we're looking, again, as Kelly said, we're looking for equity. I have been working with groups in Jamaica Plain on and off since 2016 to advocate for dog parks. Unfortunately, as has been said, every time we get close to approval, there's always something that thwarts our efforts. The most recent efforts were with DCR in 2017 and 2018. It received support from the community, but it only took a few neighbors to completely crush that plan. with limited space and resources available, some compromise needs to happen. We suggest, as before, we suggest to have creating an advisory committee, such as in the town of Brookline, where all points of view are heard and a compromise is met. In Brookline, they have learned to share their public spaces and athletic fields. And I think that we can do something like that here as well. Perhaps a hybrid model where we have both gated off-leash parks as well as sharing certain athletic fields with limited, within limitations of time and timing of the seasons. Personally, I'd like to add that I've lived in Jamaica Plain since 1981 and have had dogs all of my life. It has been extremely frustrating for me as a dog owner to continue to push for this amenity and not see any significant results, while I'm also threatened with citations from animal control when all I want to do is safely exercise my dog. Many dog owners like myself see parks not only as a space to exercise and socialize our dogs, but also a place to meet our neighbors and build community bonds. Again, we are forced to create our own dog parks, which are currently illegal. And we feel like criminals, quite frankly, when we do so. And all we want is to have a safe space for our dogs to exercise, where we don't have to bother walking pedestrians who are walking by or people who are walking their dogs on leash. So this, unfortunately, because there is no current dog park, it creates sort of a culture clash between people who want to exercise their dogs off leash and people who don't like to see that. So instead of creating more tension between dog owners versus non-dog owners, I think that we can find some sort of compromise where everyone is happy, or at least somewhat happy. So for these reasons, I fully support the efforts to build more dog parks, and in Jamaica Plain in particular. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Susan Redline, you're next.
I'm so sorry. I am logged on to someone else's Zoom account. My name is Paige Sparks. I am a resident of Jamaica Plain and a lifelong dog lover. I've been caring for people's pets in the Boston area for over 10 years, and I'm also a foster through Last Hope Canine. A safe space, ideally fenced to exercise dogs, is of paramount importance for dog lovers like myself, but also creates an environment that is safe and enjoyable for non-dog owners or owners who need to keep their dogs on leash. As council members and others have mentioned, this is an issue of equity on a number of planes, whether it's accessibility, racial justice, or economic equity. Therefore, I fully support the efforts of the council, specifically Councilor Arroyo, in calling for a minimum of one city-sponsored off-leash dog park per neighborhood. I do think that programs like the Green Dog Initiative in Brookline are something that we can learn from and perhaps implement, but I'm really distressed to see that there are not more spaces that are safe and accessible for residents of Boston. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Next up is Jay Greenspan.
Hi.
Hello. Hi, Jay.
Hi, thanks. I am a Hyde Park resident and have a COVID pup here who we've had for just under a year now. And I agree with everybody who has talked about both the joy of having a dog as part of your household and the overall benefits to the dog and the community if there are good spaces for these animals. I wanted to, first of all, just say that I lived in New York City for a number of years with a dog, and the parks there, many of the parks have off-leash hours, which has been discussed here. And that really, I got to say, worked out really well in, very, very densely populated areas, from 6 to 8 or something, that was allowed for the dogs to be off leash. And the dog owners, took good care of the place.
Hello?
After them. I think
Hey, Priscilla.
Can excuse me, can you please?
Nope, I can I can
Excuse
talk.
me, can you please go on mute, please? This is a Zoom conference. Jay, continue, please. I'm sorry about
Thank
that.
you. Yeah, no problem. I got to, in listening to the government officials talking about this, I got to say I was a little confused and a little concerned about some of what I heard there. The idea that the community itself has to raise $250,000 to implement a dog park ends up, benefiting those communities that are capable, that can easily put their hands on that kind of money. It also sort of speaks to an idea that this is not a legitimate use of public funds, which I think is just like, this should be part of a budget. This should be part of a how we think about our public spaces. And the way Parks Commissioner Woods discussed the limitations on where a park can go and the needs, it seemed like there's just ends up being a self-fulfilling outcome here, where we have, very difficult to reach, very limited dog parks that are sort of, it creates a bar that is extraordinarily difficult to reach. We've got, somebody noted in Hyde Park, we have really nice public spaces. We have really nice spaces. There's Colella Field here, which would make for a wonderful dog park. It's very seldom used by people for any other reason, yet it, it can't be used. So I would just like to, hope that our government, our city government, actually makes this, and, the mayor's office makes this a priority that filters down to the Parks Department, that this becomes something that they have to implement, that it's not something where we're just left to the, that it's left to the individual communities to advocate forcefully and then raise money. That's not, I don't think that's how government's supposed to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Jackie White. Hi, Jackie, you're next.
Hi there. Thank you so much, Chairman and council members. I want to echo what everyone has said so far about the tremendous need for dog parks in Boston. I currently live in Roxbury, and that's one area that I haven't heard mentioned so far. I previously lived in the South End, where I had access to both Clarendon Dog Park and Peters Dog Park. And moving here to Roxbury, I certainly was at a loss at the lack of space for dogs. During the pandemic, I lost my dog of 11 years, and I ended up getting a new puppy. And as a result of having a new puppy, I was able to meet a lot of neighbors in the neighborhood. Despite having lived here for 6 years, I have some of the strongest relationships with my neighbors that I've had to date, simply as a result of having dogs and coming together to socialize. And so, thinking about and hearing about the challenges other neighborhoods of Boston have had, it really is discouraging to think we could spend 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years working on a dog park only to have it shut down, particularly since our dogs may not live that long. And so, I think one thing that's unique about Roxbury is there are lots of city-owned plots. We have actually been using one of them temporarily. And I will say that it does cause tension with neighbors when we don't have places for our dogs to play. There's a lot of frustration about, people not picking up after their dogs, or people who are scared of dogs and don't want to see them as frequently on the street. So kind of having a safe place, contained place where dogs can play is very much needed. And from my perspective, what I really feel we need is transparency on this process. To echo what others have said, the $250,000 is just not feasible, particularly among my neighbors here in Roxbury. And from an equity standpoint, we need to have a place for our dogs to socialize. It's good for their health. It's good for our health. And so, clarity on, whether or not we have to establish a nonprofit, whether or not we have to raise $250,000. And then if let's say we're able to do all that, then what's the next step after that to actually make this thing a reality? So I appreciate everyone's time today, and I look forward to having some clarity and transparency in this process so that we can get access to dog parks for the humans and the dogs that greatly need them here in Roxbury. So thank you all.
Thank you for your comments, testimony. Next up is Elizabeth.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Elizabeth.
Thank you. And thank you all for your work, all the counselors, the city councilors. I'm fine with dog parks, although I've never been a dog owner, other than when I was a kid. But I want to talk about unfenced, off-leash dog parks as it applies to the Charles Gate Park that is in the process of being created. It's part of Olmsted's Muddy River, but it's broken up by, it starts at the Charles, and then it's broken up by Beacon Street. Then there's a block, about a block width between Beacon Street and Com Ave going towards Brookline. And then it's broken up by that area of Com Ave. And then there's another section of the park, and then there's a third break for Com Ave going into Boston. And then there's a break between that, when across Com Ave to Newbury Street. So it's a very small park. It will be a very small park, I'm sorry. And I think I thought that what we were talking about today was off-leash parks. And it's just too small. I'm fine with a park going in for dogs, but it should be, because it's so small, it would have to be fenced, because it's just too small for an off-leash area. At least that's what I think, given the number of people that would be using it, many of which would be children in carriages. And given I'm in Back Bay, there's a lot of older people. And the closest park, I think, is really at Clarendon. So, and then there's the Com Ave, the mall, with a few benches, but that's about it. So I just don't think it's big enough. It's certainly big enough to have a dog park. I've never quarreled about that. It's been in the works for about a year, creating it and raising the money for it, et cetera. But it's just not big enough to have an off-leash section. The dog area needs to be fenced in. Am I within the 2 minutes?
Yes, you are. Thank you,
Here,
Elizabeth.
thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for your testimony. Alan, you're up next. Alan, is Alan still with us? Going once, going twice. Okay, Alan's not with us. That's all I have for public testimony at this time. I would like to give it to Councilor Arroyo for his closing statement. And then I'll make final comments at the very end. But Councilor Arroyo, would you like to make closing statements before we conclude?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My camera's off just to preserve the battery of my phone here. But I want to thank everybody for their testimony, for their engagement. This is certainly not the end of this process. To be clear, at least I hope this was my interpretation, what I understood, and I'll follow up and make sure that it's not the case. I believe what Commissioner Woods was referring to at the $250,000 is that's the general cost of a dog park, and that the city does foot that cost when they build them. That would be the budget request that would be made of the counselor to accommodate in the budget. But I will certainly follow up, and I don't know if he's still here on that particular piece, because I agree, expecting all of our communities to be able to come up with $250,000 individually is, I mean, that's wild. I couldn't even imagine having to do that. So that shouldn't be the case. I would certainly advocate for that not to be the case. And it's my hope that Commissioner Woods was not implying that is the way that has to happen. And so I look forward to advocating for a continued
dog parks in the city. I'll be seeing what it would take to try and get one, if not in this fiscal year, in the next fiscal year, and engaging with the community on bringing those directly to the neighborhoods that I represent, certainly. So thank you, Mr. Chair. And our panelists.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. I want to say thank you, Councilor Arroyo, for bringing this hearing order forward. I want to say thank you to my colleagues on the City Council for testifying. I want to thank the city administration team that also testified, along with the community advocates, Kara Holmquist from the MSPCA and Claudia Dunn from the Dog Park Association of Southwest Boston. I also want to say thank you to the advocates and residents of Boston for testifying, for your informative discussion here this afternoon. In closing, let me just say that this hearing order was brought forth by Council Arroyo, and as the chair of this committee, I would like to keep this discussion in committee for a follow-up conversation and discussion, which would be a working session. And so I'll work closely with Council Arroyo and with the administration team and have a follow-up discussion on where we go from here. But that will include testimony again from city officials. And in the meantime, I know there's some outstanding questions. You could follow up to my office, and I will make sure we get you the correct answer. Or you could also follow up with the city council staff, central staff, and I'm going to provide you that email. It's juan.lopez@boston.gov. juan.lopez@boston.gov. So again, this is the first step. It's not the final step. And a working session is basically listening in depth to a detailed discussion from people that Council Arroyo might recommend, experts such as yourself, on where we go from here and what are the next steps to make this possible. I also wanted to highlight one final point. I still think there's a breakdown in communication between dog owners and non-dog owners, that we have to bridge that gap. And that takes all of us to be part of it, city officials, residents of the city, dog owners, non-dog owners, about how we work together, because having such conflicts is not healthy. It's not good for the city. It's not good for our residents, and it only divides people. And our job here as a city council, as a body, is trying to bring diverse opinions together, listen to people respectfully, and come up with some type of compromise that works best for everybody. I think we need to do more public awareness education campaign on this critical issue. I don't pretend to be an expert, but if I can continue to be helpful, please include me in that discussion. At this time, the order for a hearing to discuss off-leash dog recreation spaces in the city of Boston is over, and I will take I will follow up with Council Arroyo on next steps. I also want to thank the City Council Central staff for their work, including Warren and including Kerry as well. Thank you very much, and this meeting is now over. Thank you.